Arjun and Meera had been married for 7 years, but the spark that once lit up their lives had begun to fade, replaced by the monotonous rhythm of daily routines and endless responsibilities that consumed every waking moment of their existence. They lived in a small apartment in Mumbai, where Arjun worked as a senior developer at a prestigious software company, and Meera taught art at a local school, filling young minds with creativity and colors that seemed to be missing from her own life lately. In the beginning, everything had been perfect, almost like a fairy tale that neither of them believed could ever end. Every morning, Arjun would wake up early to brew fresh coffee while Meera prepared breakfast. They would sit together at their tiny dining table, sharing dreams and plans for the future, discussing everything from trivial matters to profound philosophical questions that kept them talking for hours. Weekends were sacred, reserved exclusively for each other as they explored the city hand in hand, visiting markets where Meera would pick out fresh flowers and vegetables, while Arjun carried the bags and made her laugh with his silly jokes. They would catch afternoon movies at the old cinema hall near their house, sharing popcorn and stealing kisses in the dark. And at night they would climb up to the terrace of their building, spreading out a blanket under the stars and talking about their dreams until the city fell silent around them. Meera would point at constellations and make up stories about them while Arjun listened with adoration in his eyes, mesmerized not by the stars but by the way her face lit up when she spoke about things she was passionate about. But slowly, imperceptibly, like sand slipping through fingers, life's relentless pace began pulling them apart. Arjun's company started demanding more from him, expecting late nights and weekend work as they competed in an increasingly cutthroat market. Promotions were dangled like carrots in front of ambitious young professionals, and Arjun found himself saying yes to every extra project, every additional responsibility, convincing himself it was all for their future, for the house they wanted to buy, for the life they wanted to build. He would come home exhausted, his eyes red from staring at computer screens for 14 hours straight, barely able to mumble a hello before collapsing on the couch. Meera would watch him from the kitchen, her heart aching with a loneliness she couldn't quite articulate. She too had become consumed by her work, taking on additional responsibilities at school, organizing art exhibitions and cultural programs, staying late to help struggling students, throwing herself into her career with an intensity that surprised even herself. Perhaps it was easier to focus on work than to acknowledge the growing distance between her and the man she loved. Their conversations had reduced to functional exchanges, quick questions about mundane matters that required no real connection or vulnerability. Did you eat? Are the bills paid? We need to buy groceries. These were the sentences that now defined their relationship, a far cry from the deep, meaningful discussions they once shared. The silence between them grew louder each day, filling their apartment with an oppressive weight that neither knew how to lift. They still slept in the same bed but on opposite sides, careful not to touch, as if physical distance could somehow protect them from the emotional chasm that was widening between their hearts. One evening when Arjun returned from office particularly late, around 11 at night, he found Meera standing on the balcony, her silhouette backlit by the city lights, and he noticed her shoulders shaking slightly. He approached quietly and realized she was crying, tears streaming down her face as she stared out at the endless expanse of buildings and lights that seemed to mock their isolation. He felt his heart constrict with pain and guilt. When he asked her what was wrong, his voice barely a whisper, she turned to him with eyes full of unshed tears and said, "Nothing was wrong." She was just tired, but Arjun knew better. He could see past the words to the truth that lay beneath. They were both tired, exhausted not just physically but emotionally, tired of pretending everything was fine when their marriage was slowly crumbling. He reached out and pulled her into his arms, feeling her resistance for just a moment before she melted against him, her tears soaking into his shirt as years of suppressed emotions finally found release. They stood there for what felt like hours, holding each other as if afraid to let go, afraid that releasing their grip might mean losing each other forever. Finally, Arjun spoke, his voice thick with emotion, saying they couldn't continue like this. They needed to find their way back to each other, to rediscover the love that had brought them together in the first place. Meera pulled back slightly to look at him, her eyes searching his face for answers neither of them had. She admitted she didn't know where to start. Everything had become so complicated, so tangled up in responsibilities and expectations and fears that she had forgotten what it felt like to simply be happy with him. That night, they stayed up talking. Really talking for the first time in months. Sitting on the balcony floor with their backs against the wall. Sharing fears and frustrations they had been hiding from each other. Arjun confessed that he had been chasing promotions and success because he felt inadequate. Afraid that he wasn't providing enough. That he wasn't good enough as a husband, Meera cried harder hearing this. Telling him that she had never cared about money or status. All she wanted was him, his time, his attention, his presence in her life. She admitted that she had thrown herself into work as a way to cope with the loneliness. To fill the void his absence had created, they realized that night that they had both been running, fleeing from their problems instead of facing them together. They had forgotten the fundamental truth that marriage is a partnership, requiring constant effort, communication, and above all, presence as dawn broke over the city. Painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they made a pact, a promise to each other that they would fight for their relationship, that they would make time for each other no matter how busy life got. They decided that love wasn't just a feeling but a choice, a daily decision to prioritize each other above all else. The next morning, Arjun went to his manager and had a difficult conversation about work-life balance, explaining that he needed to set boundaries, that he could no longer sacrifice his personal life for the company. It was a risky move that could have affected his career, but he knew that without Meera, his success would be meaningless. Surprisingly, his manager was understanding, perhaps having faced similar struggles himself, and they worked out a schedule that would allow Arjun to leave office by 7 most days. Meera made similar changes at school, declining some extra responsibilities and learning to say no when necessary, delegating tasks she had previously insisted on doing herself. They decided that every Friday night would be their date night, sacred and inviolable, no matter what else was happening in their lives. This time belonged to them and them alone. At first it felt awkward, like two strangers trying to remember how to be comfortable with each other. Their conversations felt forced, their laughter uncertain, but they persisted, showing up for each other week after week, slowly peeling back the layers of distance that had built up between them. One Friday, they went to Marine Drive, that iconic stretch of Mumbai's coastline where they had gone on their first date years ago. They walked along the promenade holding hands, watching the waves crash against the tetrapods, breathing in the salty air that seemed to cleanse their spirits. They bought Pelpuri from a street vendor and sat on the parapet, legs dangling over the edge, watching the sun sink into the Arabian Sea. Meera turned to Arjun and said she had been afraid they would never find their way back to each other, that they had drifted too far apart to ever bridge the gap. Arjun squeezed her hand and told her that relationships go through seasons. Sometimes there's sunshine and sometimes there's rain. But what matters is weathering the storms together, refusing to give up when things get difficult. He said that he had realized something important, that love in its truest form is not just passion and romance, though those are wonderful, but love is also commitment. Showing up even when you don't feel like it, choosing your partner even when they're difficult, fighting for the relationship even when it would be easier to walk away. Meera felt tears prick her eyes, but this time they were tears of hope rather than despair. She leaned her head on his shoulder and they sat there in comfortable silence, watching the city light up as darkness fell, feeling more connected than they had in years. Over the following weeks and months, they continued this journey of rediscovery, learning to be vulnerable with each other again, sharing not just the highlights, but the struggles and insecurities that they had previously hidden. They started leaving little notes for each other, silly messages that made them smile during difficult days. Arjun would slip a note into Meera's lunchbox saying how much he loved her art, how proud he was of her talent. Meera would leave post-its on his laptop with encouraging words for his presentations, reminding him that he was brilliant and capable. They reinstated their old ritual of morning coffee together, waking up 30 minutes earlier just to sit and talk before the chaos of the day began. These small acts of love and attention, seemingly insignificant in isolation, began to weave their lives back together, creating a tapestry of renewed intimacy and connection. Then one day Arjun received news that both excited and terrified him. His company was launching a groundbreaking project, something that aligned perfectly with his skills and passions. His dream project in many ways, but there was a catch. The project required extensive travel, meetings across different cities, sometimes being away for weeks at a time. His first instinct was to decline. remembering the promise he had made to Meera to prioritize their relationship above career advancement. But when he discussed it with her that evening, Meera surprised him with her response. She told him he should take the opportunity, that she would support him completely. She said that their relationship was now strong enough to withstand the challenges of distance, that they had built a foundation of trust and communication that wouldn't crumble just because he had to travel. But she made him promise that no matter where he was, he would always make her feel like a priority. That distance would never be an excuse for disconnect. Arjun felt overwhelmed with gratitude and love for this woman who believed in him so completely, who was willing to sacrifice her comfort for his dreams. He promised that he would call her every night, that he would share his experiences with her, that she would be part of his journey even when physically apart, and he kept that promise religiously, no matter how exhausted he was, no matter what time zone he was in. He would find time to video call Meera. They would talk about their days, sharing the mundane details that couples often overlook. He would show her the places he visited, the food he tried, making her laugh with his attempts to pronounce local dishes. Meera would update him on her students, the funny things kids said, the progress her struggling students were making. They would end each call with, "I love you" and "I miss you," words that never lost their meaning despite repetition. Interestingly, the distance made them appreciate each other more. They stopped taking their time together for granted. When Arjun came home from his trips, they would make those days special, exploring new restaurants, taking short trips to nearby places, or simply staying home and binge-watching their favorite shows. Wrapped in each other's arms, Arjun would bring back little gifts. Nothing expensive, but thoughtful things that showed he was thinking of her. A bookmark from a local bookstore, art supplies from a city known for its crafts, a handwritten letter describing how much he missed her. These gestures filled Meera's heart with warmth, reminding her that love isn't shown through grand gestures alone, but through consistent small acts of thoughtfulness and care. Then came Meera's turn to spread her wings. She received an invitation to judge a state-level art competition, a significant recognition of her skills and reputation. The competition was in another state and would require her to be away for 2 weeks. She felt torn, excited about the opportunity but guilty about leaving when Arjun was also traveling frequently. She worried that their relationship would suffer if both of them were away so often. But when she shared her concerns with Arjun, he was adamant that she should go. He told her that a healthy relationship doesn't mean losing your individual identity, that both partners should have the space and support to pursue their passions and dreams. He said he was incredibly proud of her achievement and wouldn't let her miss this opportunity for anything. Hearing this, Meera broke down in tears, overwhelmed by his unconditional support. She realized that Arjun truly understood what partnership meant. It wasn't about one person always sacrificing for the other, but about both individuals supporting each other's growth, celebrating each other's successes, and finding joy in each other's happiness. She accepted the invitation and went to judge the competition. It was an enriching experience that opened new doors for her. She met talented young artists whose passion reminded her why she fell in love with art in the first place. She conducted workshops, shared her knowledge, and felt a sense of fulfillment that had been missing. Every evening she would call Arjun and excitedly tell him about her day, about the amazing artwork she saw, the meaningful conversations she had, and Arjun would listen with genuine interest, asking questions, encouraging her to make the most of this experience. When Meera returned home, Arjun had planned a surprise for her. He had decorated their apartment with fairy lights and flowers, cooked her favorite meal, though it wasn't perfect since cooking wasn't his strong suit, and created a romantic atmosphere that made her feel cherished and valued. As they sat down for dinner, Meera looked at him with overwhelming love and gratitude. She thanked him for being the kind of partner who lifted her up rather than holding her back. Arjun simply smiled and said that her success was his success. Her happiness was his happiness because they were a team, in it together through all of life's adventures. Several months passed in this beautiful rhythm of mutual support and understanding. Their relationship had transformed from the struggling marriage it once was into a strong, resilient partnership built on trust, communication, and genuine care for each other's well-being. They had learned that love requires constant nurturing, that you can't just set your relationship on autopilot and expect it to thrive. It needs attention, effort, and conscious choices every single day. But then came the biggest test of their relationship. Arjun's company offered him a significant promotion, the kind that comes once in a career, with a substantial salary increase, impressive title, and the opportunity to lead a major division. It was everything he had worked towards for years, a validation of his skills and dedication. But there was a significant catch. He would need to relocate to Singapore for at least 2 years, possibly longer. It was a non-negotiable condition of the promotion. When Arjun received this news, he felt a complex mix of emotions: excitement at the professional opportunity, pride in being recognized, but also a heavy dread at the thought of what this might mean for his marriage. He knew that long-distance relationships were challenging, and asking Meera to leave everything she had built in Mumbai, her thriving career, her students who adored her, her friends and family, felt like an impossible ask. That evening, when he sat Meera down to discuss it, he was prepared to decline the offer. He had made up his mind that no promotion was worth risking their relationship. He explained the opportunity to her, being completely honest about both the benefits and the sacrifices it would require. He told her that while it was flattering to be considered, he had decided to turn it down because their relationship was more important than any career achievement. But Meera stopped him before he could say more. She asked him to really think about what he was saying, whether he was making this decision because he truly didn't want the promotion or because he was afraid of how it might affect them. Arjun admitted it was the latter. He was terrified of losing her, of their marriage falling apart if they lived in different countries. Meera took his hands in hers and said something that surprised him. She told him she thought he should take the opportunity, and that she would go with him to Singapore. Arjun was shocked. He protested, saying she couldn't leave her career, her life here, everything she had worked so hard to build. But Meera explained her perspective. She said that yes, she loved her job and her students, yes, she would miss Mumbai and everything familiar. But at the end of the day, her home wasn't a place, it was wherever he was. She had learned through their struggles that a relationship is worth fighting for, worth making sacrifices for. And if that meant starting over in a new country, she was willing to do it. She reminded him that he had supported her dreams unconditionally, and now it was her turn to do the same for him. Arjun felt tears streaming down his face. He had never loved her more than in that moment. Seeing her courage, her commitment, her unwavering support, he told her they would make it work, that they would build a beautiful life together in Singapore, that her sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. Meera smiled and corrected him gently, saying it wasn't a sacrifice, it was a choice. She was choosing their partnership, their future together, and she was excited about the adventure that awaited them. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. There were so many practical matters to handle. Meera had to resign from her school, which was one of the most emotional experiences of her life. Her principal tried to convince her to stay, offering her a raise and more flexibility, but Meera knew her decision was made. Her students organized a surprise farewell party, and seeing their tearful faces as they presented her with handmade cards and artwork broke her heart. She had poured so much of herself into teaching these children, helping them discover their creative potential, and leaving them felt like leaving a part of herself behind. But when she looked at Arjun's face, seeing his mix of guilt for uprooting her and gratitude for her support, she knew she was making the right choice. They spent weeks packing up their apartment, deciding what to ship, what to sell, what to give away. Each item held memories, reminders of their 7 years together in this space. The couch where they had their first major fight and their first major reconciliation. The kitchen where they had learned to cook together. The bedroom where they had shared countless intimate moments. It was bittersweet saying goodbye to this chapter of their lives. But they were also excited about the blank canvas that awaited them in Singapore. Their families had mixed reactions to the news. Arjun's parents were proud of his achievement but worried about the distance. Meera's mother cried, concerned about her daughter moving so far away. But ultimately both families supported their decision, recognizing that this young couple had weathered storms and emerged stronger. They had earned the right to chase their dreams together. The day of departure arrived faster than they expected, at Mumbai Airport. Surrounded by family and friends who had come to see them off, Meera felt a surge of conflicting emotions: sadness at leaving behind everything familiar, anxiety about the unknown future, but also excitement and hope. She turned to look at the city one last time, the chaotic, beautiful, overwhelming city that had been her home for so long. Arjun sensed her emotions and squeezed her hand, reminding her that home isn't a place but a person, and they were each other's home as their flight took off. Leaving behind the city lights of Mumbai, they held hands and looked forward, toward their new adventure, toward their future together. Singapore was a completely different world from Mumbai. Everything was so organized, clean, efficient, almost startlingly so after the beautiful chaos of Indian cities. The first few weeks were overwhelming as they tried to adapt to a new culture. New systems, new ways of life. Their apartment was smaller but modern. In a high-rise building that offered stunning views of the city skyline, Arjun threw himself into his new role, meeting new colleagues, understanding new responsibilities. Proving himself in this elevated position, he would come home excited about the projects he was working on, the innovative ideas his team was developing, and Meera would listen with genuine interest, happy to see him so fulfilled professionally. But she was struggling in ways she hadn't anticipated. Back in Mumbai, she had a clear identity. She was Meera, the art teacher, the person who inspired young minds, who made a difference in children's lives. Here she was, nobody. Just another expat wife trying to find her footing in a foreign land. She tried to stay positive, exploring the city during the day, visiting museums and art galleries, marveling at the gardens by the bay and the incredible architecture. But there were moments when the loneliness was crushing. When she would sit in their empty apartment while Arjun was at work and wonder if she had made a mistake. She missed her students, her colleagues, her friends, the familiar streets of Mumbai, even the traffic and the chaos. She missed being herself, having a purpose beyond being someone's wife. But she didn't tell Arjun about these struggles, not wanting to burden him or make him feel guilty when he was working so hard, trying so earnestly to make this move worth it for both of them. Arjun, however, was more perceptive than she gave him credit for. He noticed the forced cheerfulness in her voice, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes some days, the increasing amount of time she spent sleeping. A classic sign of depression. One evening he came home early, having deliberately left office ahead of schedule, and found her sitting on the balcony staring at the city lights with tears streaming down her face. His heart broke seeing her like this. He sat down beside her and gently asked her to tell him what was wrong. Initially she tried to brush it off, saying she was fine, just a bit homesick, but Arjun persisted, creating a safe space for her to be vulnerable. Finally, the floodgates opened and she admitted how lost she felt, how much she missed her work and her identity, how guilty she felt for feeling this way when he was working so hard, and she should be grateful for this opportunity. Arjun listened without interruption, then pulled her close and apologized. He said he had been so consumed with his new job that he hadn't noticed her struggle, and that was his failure as a partner. Meera protested, saying it wasn't his fault. But Arjun insisted that they were in this together, that her happiness was just as important as his career, that they needed to find a way for her to thrive in Singapore, just as he was thriving. They spent hours that night brainstorming ideas, researching opportunities for art teachers or freelance artists in Singapore, looking at community centers that might need instructors, exploring online platforms where she could teach. Arjun's support and determination to help her find her footing renewed Meera's spirits. She realized that she wasn't alone in this journey, that she had a partner who would help her navigate any challenge. In the following weeks, Meera started putting herself out there. She joined several expat groups for artists, attended networking events, even though it pushed her out of her comfort zone. She started a blog documenting her artistic journey in a new city, sharing both her struggles and discoveries. And slowly, gradually, opportunities started emerging. A community center invited her to conduct weekend art workshops for children. An international school needed a part-time art instructor. An online platform wanted her to create video courses on Indian art forms. Piece by piece, she started rebuilding her professional identity in this new context. And with each small success, her confidence grew. She realized that she could be flexible and adaptable while still staying true to her passion. Arjun watched her transformation with immense pride. Seeing her go from lost and uncertain to confident and thriving filled him with joy. He made sure to celebrate every milestone with her, every new student she gained, every positive review of her workshops, making her feel that her achievements were just as valuable as his corporate successes. 6 months into their Singapore journey, Meera got an opportunity that exceeded her wildest expectations. A prestigious art gallery was organizing an exhibition showcasing Asian artists, and they invited her to display her paintings. It was her first solo exhibition, and she was terrified and excited in equal measure. She spent weeks preparing, creating new pieces that reflected her journey, her emotions, her experience of being uprooted and replanted in foreign soil. Arjun helped her in every way he could. He took time off work to help with logistics. He promoted her exhibition on his social media. He invited his colleagues and their families. On the opening night, Meera stood in the gallery surrounded by her paintings, each one telling a story from her heart, and watched as people moved from one piece to another, reading the descriptions, discussing the emotions captured on canvas. A critic from a local art magazine spent considerable time studying her work and later wrote a glowing review, calling her an emerging talent to watch, saying her paintings captured the universal experience of displacement and belonging with rare authenticity. When Meera read the review, she cried tears of joy, feeling validated in a way she hadn't felt since leaving Mumbai. Arjun framed that review and hung it in their living room, a daily reminder of her talent and resilience. That evening, as they walked home from the gallery hand in hand, Meera told Arjun that she was grateful for this journey, that while it had been difficult, it had also helped her grow in ways she never anticipated. She had learned that she was stronger than she thought, more adaptable, more capable. Arjun told her he had always known she was extraordinary, but he was glad she now recognized it herself. Their life in Singapore fell into a comfortable rhythm after that, both of them thriving in their respective careers while making sure to prioritize their relationship. They established new rituals to replace the old ones they had left behind in Mumbai. Sunday mornings were for exploring hawker centers, trying different local dishes and cuisines from across Asia. They made friends with other expat couples and Singaporean neighbors. Building a community in this foreign land, they traveled whenever they could, taking advantage of Singapore's proximity to other Southeast Asian countries. They visited Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, each trip adding new experiences and memories to their shared story. Arjun's career continued to flourish. He led several successful projects that caught the attention of senior leadership. There were whispers of even bigger responsibilities on the horizon. Meera's art gained recognition beyond just the expat community. She started getting commissions from Singaporean clients. Her workshops were always fully booked, and she was invited to speak at art seminars about her unique style that blended traditional Indian techniques with contemporary themes. They were both succeeding beyond their expectations. But more importantly, they were doing it together, supporting each other through challenges, celebrating each other's victories. Growing both as individuals and as a couple, 2 years passed in what felt like both an eternity and a blink of an eye. Arjun's initial contract was coming to an end, and his company asked if he wanted to stay permanently in Singapore. They offered him another promotion, more responsibility, the opportunity to truly establish himself as a leader in the organization. It was tempting. Singapore had become home in many ways. They had built a life here, made friends, established routines. Both of them were professionally successful and personally happy. But there was also a growing homesickness, a longing for India, for family, for the familiar chaos and warmth of Mumbai, for the culture and community they had left behind. They spent many evenings discussing what they wanted, having long conversations about the pros and cons of staying versus returning. Arjun told Meera that the decision was hers to make. He was happy to stay if she wanted to continue building her career here, or to return if she missed home. Meera appreciated his consideration, but insisted that this had to be a joint decision, something they both felt good about. After much reflection and discussion, they decided to return to Mumbai. Singapore had been an incredible chapter in their story, a place where they both grew immensely. But India was home. It was where their roots were, where their families were. And after 2 years away, they were ready to go back. This time the packing and preparation felt different, tinged with nostalgia rather than anxiety. They had created beautiful memories in this city and would carry them back. They said goodbye to friends who had become like family, to places that had become special to them, to the version of themselves they had been in Singapore, on the flight back to India. Meera looked at Arjun and said that these 2 years had been transformative, that leaving Mumbai had been scary, but ultimately one of the best decisions they made. It proved that they could face any challenge together, that their relationship was resilient enough to withstand major upheavals. Arjun agreed, adding that he felt they were returning as stronger, more mature individuals, and as a more solid couple. They had learned so much about themselves, about each other, about what really mattered in life. Landing in Mumbai felt surreal. The familiar chaos of the airport, the humid air, the cacophony of sounds in multiple languages. It was overwhelming and wonderful all at once. Their families were waiting for them, tearful reunions and tight hugs, everyone talking at once, trying to catch up on 2 years in 2 minutes. Over the next few weeks, they settled back into Mumbai life, but with a different perspective than before. Arjun joined a startup that offered him significant equity and the chance to build something from ground up. The work-life balance was better than his previous corporate job, and he valued that more now than he would have before Singapore. Meera opened her own art studio, a small but beautiful space where she could teach children and adults, conduct workshops, display her paintings, and create a community of artists. The experience and confidence she gained in Singapore gave her the courage to pursue this entrepreneurial venture. She named it Canvas Dreams, and it quickly became popular in their neighborhood. Their apartment was in a different area of Mumbai than where they lived before, a conscious decision to start this new chapter fresh rather than trying to recreate what they once had. They decorated it together, blending elements from their Singapore home with Indian touches, creating a space that reflected their journey. Sunday mornings were once again for Marine Drive, walking along the seafront, eating pav bhaji from their favorite vendor, watching the city wake up. But now they also made time for the hawker food they had grown to love in Singapore, seeking out Asian restaurants and cooking those dishes at home, blending their experiences into a richer, more diverse life. One Sunday evening, almost a year after their return, they found themselves sitting at their favorite spot on Marine Drive, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Arjun turned to Meera and said that he had been thinking about their journey, how far they had come from that night years ago when she stood crying on their balcony and he realized their marriage was in trouble. He said he was grateful for that dark period because it forced them to confront their issues rather than letting their relationship die slowly. Meera nodded thoughtfully and said that sometimes the hardest experiences teach us the most valuable lessons. Their struggles had taught them what truly mattered. How to communicate, how to support each other, how to keep choosing each other even when it would be easier not to. She said that many couples go through rough patches, but not all of them come out stronger. The difference is in whether you give up or fight for your relationship, whether you see your partner as an adversary or an ally. Arjun took her hand and said he felt incredibly lucky that they had both chosen to fight, that they had both been willing to be vulnerable, to change, to prioritize their relationship above individual comfort or ego. He said that looking back, every challenge they faced, from those early months of drift to the struggles of Singapore, to building new lives twice over, all of it had strengthened their bond. Meera squeezed his hand and with tears in her eyes told him that she loved him more now than she did on their wedding day, that the love they had now was deeper, richer, more authentic because it had been tested and proven resilient. It wasn't just the easy infatuation of newlyweds, but the hard-won love of partners who had weathered storms together. Arjun pulled her close and kissed her forehead, whispering that she was his home, his anchor, his greatest adventure. They sat there as the sun disappeared below the horizon and the city lights began to twinkle on. Two people who had almost lost each other but found their way back, stronger and more committed than ever. Their story wasn't one of perfect romance or a relationship without problems. It was real and messy and beautiful precisely because of its imperfections. It was a testament to the power of commitment, communication, and choosing love daily even when feelings falter. As they walked back home hand in hand, they talked about the future, about the dreams they still wanted to chase together. Maybe children someday, maybe traveling the world, maybe building their careers to new heights. But whatever the future held, they knew they would face it together, supporting each other, celebrating each other, growing together. Their love story wasn't ending, it was just beginning a new chapter, and they were both excited to see where life would take them next, knowing that as long as they had each other, they could handle anything that came their way.